Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm a partner at Deloitte, and over the last number of years, I've had the pleasure to host these series of live webcast conversations that we have been organizing, producing, and putting on primarily for our tech leadership audiences and those individuals curious about enterprise technology. And we've meandered around different topics that we thought would be important and timely. Some of them more technical, others less technical, but I hope all of them impactful. Today is going to be a very, very, very exciting, great conversation. I very much look forward to it because I kind of know what's coming. Uh, I am thrilled to welcome my brother from another mother, Mike Bechtel. Mike, it is such a delight and pleasure to welcome you back to this conversation.
Oh, back at you, Dalibor. Thanks for having me, man.
It's an absolute pleasure and delight always. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a live conversation, so I would encourage you and invite you to join us by submitting any comments or questions using the Q&A function of this Zoom platform. So please take advantage of that. We'll do our best to address as many questions as we can. Um, and then today's topic is the topic of executive storytelling.
And team, I'm not sure if I froze or Dalibor froze. Oh, there
Oh,
you are, brother.
oh, am I back? Oh, I'm sorry.
You're back
Uh,
on. You're good.
I was just mentioning that the story today is about storytelling, and I have a pleasure of working with some really successful, seasoned senior executives. I have personally seen what a critical skill it is to be able to articulate your thoughts in a compelling, exciting story. So this, I think, is going to be very useful, very usable, very practical, and I know that I'm going to learn a lot. So, Michael, without much further ado, you have the coolest title at Deloitte amongst the 500,000 Deloitters around the world. You are our chief futurist. I would love if you can tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then let's jump into the conversation.
Well, Dalibor, first and foremost, man. Again, opening with gratitude. There's nothing better than to open with that. And thank you for having me. Two, a little bit about me, gang. For those who've joined this series over the last couple of years, you've got a handle on me, right? Focused on chief futurist. What is that? Emerging technology research director, right? But that's not as shiny as futurist, right? And I think that's part of storytelling, right? Because words matter, language matters, framing matters. That said, I'm not here to talk about emerging tech today. What a relief! What a change, right? I'm not here to talk about innovation, which is my side hustle at the University of Notre Dame, where I teach graduate programs in how to drive change in cultures chock full of skeptical experts. We're not here to talk about that either. We're here to talk about what I like to call my side hustle, which is that I'm a semi-professional raconteur. And what's raconteur? Well, that's just jargon for storyteller. Because what I've learned, and team, this is really at the heart of why we're doing today's session. Um, the delivery of information in a rote, white papery kind of a way doesn't cut it in today's world. When I was 16 years old, I worked as a short order cook at a national monument restaurant in Bandelier, New Mexico, near Los Alamos. I'm sure I served some of the Manhattan Project alumni. And I'll never forget, one of our menu items was fajitas. And our manager made it super clear that uh, before the fajitas ever left the kitchen, you had to do this production where you squeeze the lemon juice on the beef. Because as he told me in his inimitable words, we don't sell the steak, we sell the sizzle. And good Lord, does that stick with you? Because keep in mind, you need great steak, right? The substance, the quality, the intellectual heft needs to be there, right? But without the shine, without the inspirational candy coating, right? Without that spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down, people never notice the steak. And never less so than in this age where we have so much stuff competing for our attention. And so, this session, right, a play in two acts, is about two things. One, why storytelling matters in business, right?
Mm.
And two, 10 practical tactical tips for telling said tales, right? This is a note-taking opportunity for those of you who are looking for something actionable. I got you. I actually have a little teaser for you, and that is at the end of this session, I will have a visual placemat that you can use, you can print out, you can screenshot. I had one lady say she used it as a desktop wallpaper. That's aggressive. But the punchline is I hope to arm you with some applied learning here. So let's do it. Let's talk about it. Why does storytelling matter? Well, when I was an undergrad, I studied anthropology. People say, how in the heck did you end up in tech? Well, it was 1997, and if you could spell www, you were issued a laptop and told, go forth and consult. But that's not important right now. What's important is that I had a professor named Jim Bellis who taught us about a people in the Philippines called the Agta. And what made this indigenous people extra notable was that they didn't just sort of survive into the modern world. They downright thrived. They had this really interesting and sociologically remarkable ability to weave the best of their indigenous culture with the need to haves of modernity, and they were growing. And one of the things that was supposed, the hypothesis behind their not just survival but thriving, was the way they elected their leaders. They didn't pick the oldest to be the chief. They didn't pick the wisest. It was not a feats of strength competition. They picked the best storyteller. And the reason it was deduced was because storytelling was a means of transmitting the cultural carrier signal from the elders to the youths with maximum fidelity and minimum loss. Said another way, storytelling was the treasure map that kept their culture humming across generations. Now, many of you who are joining this call might not be anthropologists, right? You might not be here for that explanatory frame. And so let's try this one. This is a little more techie in nature. Let's say, Dalibor, for example, I hit up this museum in Paris and I see this painting. And, it's pretty good. It's pretty cool painting. There's this, brunette lady and she's got this mysterious smile, and I do my best to communicate it to you. Well, what I wish I could do, right? What I wish I could do to explain the experience to you is copy paste it right from my noggin to yours, right? Lossless, Control C, Control V, neocortex, bam.
Yep.
But take it from a geek, right? Despite headlines in the news about, companies like but not limited to Neuralink and others, brain-computer interfaces aren't quite ready yet, right? This ability to deliver a lossless data transfer from my noggin to yours, nah, it's not a thing yet. And so what do? We settle for what I like to call a lossy API called language.
Yep.
And so I experience that painting. I translate the experience into movements in my mouth,
Yep.
which translate into movements and molecules in the air between my mouth and your ears, Dalibor. And then you translate that from your ear to your brain, and what you end up with, right, if we're being honest, you end up with a partially understood signal. Which is why so many of our colleagues, so many of our clients, well, the functional spec was quite clear. I don't know what happened. Well, I'll tell you what happened,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Micro misunderstandings in series beget fidelity loss.
How
Well,
powerful this is. Mike, this requires pause and reflection. Um, Honestly, like the micro, and this is really important part, the micro errors in translation
yeah,
that compound, right? So
they
you
compound.
lose fidelity. This is the story of most of our problems, quite frankly.
I mean, well, and it is, and Dalibor, you know, it's even worse than this, right? Because we live in an age where this is happening over Zoom or
Hmm.
Teams or what have you. And here's why this is a thing. This isn't the usual grousing about electronic collaboration. It's the recognition that of the 100, 200, 300 friends who are on this meeting, like, and the following is not an attack, but I'm guessing half of you have another screen open, maybe
Mm,
two. You're washing the dog. You're multitasking. You're doing other things,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And and when you recognize that everybody is saturated in sensation all the freaking time, the results get even worse, right? And so
Excellent.
people say, well, why is everything a mess? Well, the answer is it's, as I like to call it, weapons of mass distraction,
Yeah,
right?
brilliant, man.
And so gang, this is why storytelling matters, because Rutherford Rogers, Yale, 1970s, goodness, he said, in an age where information approaches infinity, that which information consumes, namely our attention, approaches zero. And so the name of the game team is something that researchers literally call attention economics. These 10 tips to telling tales are hacks that I've learned over the last 25 years in my journey from geek to geezer to help you short circuit attention overload
Yeah.
and get down to signal. So, what do you say, Dalibor? Should we do it? Should we move to our practical, tactical, note taking opportunity portion of today's agenda?
Let us rock and roll, man.
Rock and roll. Okay. So, team, each of these tips, right, represented by a handy dandy icon, we'll explain why in a minute. Let's do it. The only thing more awkward than that silence that you all just experienced is the feeling that I just experienced, knowing that several hundred of you were just sitting there wondering, what in the heck is he doing? There's this great line in the old movie, and it kills me to think that it's old, but here we are, right, Dalibor? Pulp Fiction,
Yeah.
where Uma Thurman's character says to John Travolta's character, you know you're really comfortable with somebody when you can just shut up.
Yeah.
She had an extra word in there, but this is a family show. Here's the thing. My dad grew up on the south side of Chicago, right? Super meat and potatoes, basic guy. He said to me once, he goes, you know what? God gave you two ears and two eyes and one mouth for a reason. Figure it out. And what he meant by that was there's a temptation to fill the space with noise and with sound, when what we should actually be doing is leaving space between the notes. Dalibor, you demonstrated that beautifully a few moments ago when you said, this is a cause for pause and reflection.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do that, you start to sound like, remember in the old Peanuts, Charlie Brown cartoons, and the teacher sounded like that, and it devolved into noise for the students, which is why they thought the grown-ups were just background cosmic radiation, right? Pauses are more than spaces for reflection and contemplation. Pauses are a space for your own reflection and contemplation as the storyteller. Time spent thinking about, okay, Who are these several hundred people who've joined us today? Well, they're executives from different groups across different businesses in North America, maybe a
Yep.
few international. Great. What do
Mhm.
they want? Well, given the title of the session, some of them are here to be higher performing executives. Some of them are here to just be better storytellers. Some of them are here for the Venn diagram intersection.
Mhm.
It's more than just know your audience, it's thoughtfully pause and consider their expectations. Because if you don't, you're going to sound like the telling your tale rather than the tale they crave. Now, part of their expectations are tacit, right? Tacit is, oh, I do believe he's the futurist. I bet he's going to be very nerdy. Well, facts. But I'm going to do my best to also be extra approachable because I want to diffuse that particular preconception, right? Executive storytelling, I bet this will be rather dry. No, I'm going to do my best to diffuse your expectations that this is boring. Time spent hushing at the beginning is the best time you can spend because, as good old Stephen Covey said, right? You got to make sure that you sharpen the saw. If you jump right to cutting with a dull blade,
Mhm.
everybody's going to have a bad time. Now, two, you're going to need 3 coats of paint. And here's what I mean by this. There's this old adage in communication. It says anything worth communicating, you have to do 3 times. You're going to tell them what you're going to tell them.
Mhm.
Then, right, we get rocket science here. Ready?
You're gonna tell
You
them.
got to tell them, right? And then what are you going to do? You know, Dalibor, I would never dare stoop to this level of rhetorical question to you, but can you guess? Can you guess
You're
what's
gonna
number 3?
tell them what you told them.
You tell them what you told them.
That's right.
But here's why, right? Sometimes that's delivered as just a truism. Let me back up the movie and explain why. If any of y'all have kids or have ever been a kid, you know this dynamic. I'll be in my office right here,
Yes.
Naperville, Illinois, looking at the return on invested capital calculations in a spreadsheet, and my brain is there. And my son Bennett, props, right? Right? He bursts in, right, like a bat out of heck, and he goes, "Hey, Dad, can I have $19 for Robux for something for but?" And I'm like,
What?
"Right, excuse me, pal." And he has to repeat himself. Can I have $19 to buy Robux for this game I'm playing with my friend Anderson?
Mhm.
Here's the thing. When your head is focused on X and Y comes in hot without context, your brain can't handle the context switch.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Much like if you try to paint this yellow paint over a bright blue wall, it's not going to work, right?
Mhm.
Despite the claims, it was funny. I was with a client from a leading coatings company who laughed and acknowledged there's a truth within this perceived dispersion. Despite the claims of a single miraculous $120 gallon of paint that'll coat in one coat, no. You need to prime, which is about undoing the prior color.
Yep.
Then you need to paint,
Yep.
right? Which is about applying the new color. And so, what my son Bennett has learned is that his first thing is, "Hey, Dad, do you have time for a question?" "Why, yes, I do, pal. What's up?" "Can I have Robux for my game with my friend?" "Sure, pal."
Mhm.
And so, opening with an expectation center on here's what we're going to talk about. It's not about telling him, it's about undoing whatever they were thinking about. It's about priming their mental wall for the message.
Mhm.
Then you deliver the message.
Yep.
And then at the end, you seal it for good measure. Today we've talked about, and people go, "Yeah, we did."
Mhm.
It feels remedial, gang, but you'd be shocked at how few of us do it and how seldom we do.
Very good. Like so true. So true.
It,
And
it,
what is also true is that many people know this. Many people have heard this. Many people forget it, forget to use it. So this is such a great, like that is such a great grounding. Both pause when you started, pause, think, and reflect. And this, love it.
Dude,
Thank you.
and I tell you, Dalibor, it's interesting. So many times we think about senior boardroom or C-suite audiences being busy. Like, I know you're busy, but I got this thing, blah, 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 blah. It's not that they're busy, it's just that their brain is filled with a different ROM at that moment. They're thinking about an HR matter or an intellectual property dispute. And so when you come in hot with a request for server hosting, they're like, what? So just prime it. Hey, do you have a moment to talk about the servers? Sure. What do you need?
Yeah,
Okay.
present,
Three.
present.
Three of so 3 of 10. Map the path. What does this mean? Well, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that part of what makes a bad story or a bad conversation bad is that people don't know where they are in the movie. They don't
Mm.
know where they are in the narrative. How
Mhm.
many of you, you have Dalibor, you ever been to you're at a cocktail party and you're talking to somebody and for the first 10 seconds, it's pretty good, right? Like
Mm.
it's, this is engaging. And then the next 10 seconds is
And it
like,
goes on, right?
yeah, where are we going?
And then
And
another junction, and you got to take a junction, and then yeah, exactly.
right,
Oh, I know.
right. It's not necessarily that it's a bad story or a bad narrative. It's that you don't know if you're 20% through the verbal onslaught or 90% through. And so one of the things that you need to do, again, back to managing your counterparty's attention, is you want to show them where they are by what I call mapping the path. These mysterious sort of icons along the top, right?
Mhm.
Whether you like this content or you're like, oh, this is a weird use of an hour, at least you know you're 30% of the way through.
Yeah,
We're on 3 of 10 and I can manage my energy. I
yeah.
used to run track and my coach used to say that as punishment, he would line us all up, right? If we were goofing off, he'd line us up and he would hit his little starting pistol, his whistle. And the punishment part was he wouldn't tell us how far we were going. Are we running 100 meters? Are we running 800 meters? You don't know. And so the 100-meter pace kids fall over, at about 300 meters. The 800-meter kids are jogging, and oh my gosh, the race is over. And so expectations management is where it's at. And so in a presentation, do these breadcrumbs, these skittles, these visuals. In a conversation, just use numbers. Say, gang, I was at the social club the other day and you wouldn't believe what happened. Well, 3 things specifically. For starters, ba 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 ba.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Then ba 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 ba. And finally, ba ba ba. All right, let's keep cooking. 5. Analogies. Analogies are like bridges between the known and the new. That itself is an analogy, right? He just compared an analogy to a bridge, right? It's recursive, it's meta. But the punchline is this: as leaders, as executives, as technologists, specifically technologists, we learn never, right? Never to be inaccurate, to be incomplete. We want to deliver the truth and nothing but the truth because it's science. Well, it turns out that what you actually want to do is you want to deliver optimal clarity in an optimal amount of time. And the way you do that is on your first coat of paint, okay? Also an analogy. On your first coat of paint, you want to use an analogy to connect the news you're about to share to something that people have already experienced. Why? Because think of it, if you're really nerdy, think of it like a pointer. It's a pointer back to something that's already locked in their ROM, right? That says, hey, that thing it's 85% correct. And here's the new bit, but with a twist.
Mhm.
Let me give you an example. In Hollywood, it's known that screenwriters pitch movies by explaining their movie as an old movie, but with a twist. And so imagine a really
Love it.
right, a really poorly explained version of the Lion King, right? Most people know the Lion King. It would be, so there's these lion cubs and they're in Africa and it's great. And it's a musical. And there's the dad lion who's, intimidating, and it might be James Earl Jones, but that's not important right now. And then there's the baby lion. And then the dad dies because, if you're the producer at Spago hearing this pitch, you're like, I check please. Contrast that to the way the Lion King was supposedly actually pitched, which was, all right, it's Hamlet with animals. People go, tell me more. Great, it's a cartoon, it's in Africa, and James Earl Jones. I love it.
Yeah.
Notice the first coat connects the known to the new, but not quite perfectly. The second coat comes in with all the deltas, and then the third coat seals the deal. What I found is that even in the venture capital community, I used to be a VC, right? Co-founded a venture capital firm. We talked to 4,000 startups. We only stroke checks to 15. Oof. In addition to get really good at saying no, you get really good at pattern detection. And one of the patterns we saw, Dalibor, was that people who anchored their business case in an analogy were more likely to come back with funding.
Yep.
Right? We saw one startup, it was amazing. One startup said, okay, so we've created a four-sided marketplace. One of the legs of the stool is people who own watercraft. The second leg of the stool are aspirational middle or working class individuals who would aspire to have a watercraft. Then we have an insurance entity that can indemnify a transaction between the former and the latter. And we're like, what? A similar startup shows up about 4 months later. They go, check it out. We're boat bound, Airbnb for boats. You're like, I love these guys. But it was the same model.
Yeah.
And so connect the known to the new and get over yourself about factual completeness. You have 2 more coats of paint to get it right. As a bonus, gang, we're always asking, like, how do you show up authentically? Bring your whole self to work. I want to be real. The analogy is your Trojan horse for your interests, right? Dalibor, you are often connecting things to Beatles music. You're often connecting things to your experiences working globally. So I learned to myself, this guy's a music fan. He's a musician. He grew up in Europe. What a wonderful way to show who you are through the connections and examples you lean into.
Yeah. Fantastic. Mike, I had a questions here coming through it. And I don't know if this was intentional or not, but we went from item number 3 to item number 5, skipping perhaps the item number 4. I just want to check if that is truly the case, because I had a whole bunch of people texting me on this.
You know what's so funny, team? If my dear friend Andrew Doe happens to be on the call, Andrew's seen this presentation 11 times. There's the good version of the deck that has the numbers right. There's the bad version of the deck that has the numbers wrong. Look which one I picked. But here's the funny bit. Congratulations. Those who found it, you've earned a ticket to the Wonka factory. No,
there we go.
But yeah, let's go back in time and pretend that didn't happen. Let's talk about number 4. Thanks, Oliver. God bless you. Okay. Brevity. Similar to Hush, but with a difference. And the difference is good old Mark Twain, the American essayist, humorist, novelist, storyteller. One of his great lines, he's writing a letter to his wife. And he says, excuse me, my dear, but if I'd had more time, I'd have written you a shorter letter. Think about that. More time, shorter letter. If you're anything like, well, me, or permission to pick on us, right, Dalibor? Self-deprecation is a big part of storytelling. If you're anything like consultants, say Deloitte, if you move a meeting out 2 weeks, right? Hey, let's reschedule for 2 weeks out. What do? We make even more PowerPoint slides, right? We write an even longer letter because more time means more stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm here to say that is exactly the wrong instinct.
Yeah.
You can tell refined work, back to an old, I think, Michelangelo quote, you know something's done not when you've added everything you can, but when you've taken away everything you can. right? Getting to the essential. And so the reason this works, the reason this matters, is an idea called the elusive 600. My friend Joe McCormick wrote a great book about this idea that neuroscientists have seen that the brain thinks at about 750 words a minute. The mouth runs at about 150 words per minute. And so you have this 600 word delta, this buffer that gets filled with stuff like, did I leave the lights on? I need to register Annabelle for soccer. Huh? We need to figure out dinner for the party. And the way you manage around that, interestingly, paradoxically, is you don't stuff the space with even more noise. That's how you get that Charlie Brown wah, 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 wah thing. Rather, what you do is you leave a pause so the counterparty can think of themselves having a conversation and responding. Note they're not actually responding, right? I could be in a room with 2,000 people, but if I leave the space between the notes to say, who of you has a kid or has ever been a kid? And then I pause. They can reflect and they can laugh.
Yeah.
And if I just pave over that, nobody can reflect or laugh.
Yeah.
Now, the second thing I would tell you is I was told when I was a young professional that animations in presentations were amateur and unprofessional. Poppycock, claptrap, lies. Certainly the spiral, twisty, ripple wave stuff is a little
Yeah.
high school sophomore,
Yeah.
but builds like this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Builds reduce distractions. Why? Because if I've got this whole slide built out right now, and I'm talking to you about the elusive 600, and meanwhile you're reading about builds and about how the font size should be greater than half the average. You're half listening to me, you're half
Yeah.
reading the slide, and you're
Yeah.
getting none of the value.
Yeah.
And so use the strategic withholding of information as a superpower to make sure people are locked onto what you want them to be locked onto.
That step number 4 was damn worth going back to cover.
well, I mean, it beats the alternative where we
Uh,
hit it after step 8,
I love it.
which would have been a
Excellent.
disaster.
Now we are paying attention. We are now on the right one. Number 6.
That's right. I'll leave that in there going forward as a feature, not a bug.
Yep.
Okay. 6. Team, you want to be dramatic. And by dramatic, I don't mean workplace drama. I don't mean gossip. I don't mean, Game of Thrones energy. What I mean is you want to lean into the 20,000 year undefeated storytelling rubric of all time, and that is start with a scene setter, introduce a disruptive crisis, and land the plane with a happily ever after. What do I mean here? Well, imagine this. Imagine you say, hey, boss, you know how we've got that hosting environment up in Poughkeepsie, right? And it's great, right? Pennies on the dollar and a value at twice the price. Well, here's the thing. These AI-fueled workloads are breaking the freaking bank. We didn't expect the Kubernetes cluster to melt under the load of all this LLM stuff, but good news. Toby has already figured out a way to offload some of it to a novel hosting model, which can in fact come in equal to or even cheaper than the original plan.
Love
Right?
it. Wow.
That sounds like a guy who's ready to get promoted.
Right.
As opposed
Right.
to the guy who just comes in hot with like, the servers are very expensive, sir, ...
Yeah.
Right? Or who jumps right to the happy ending without declaring victory over the dragon.
Yeah.
You need what boring other consultancies, I won't name them here, but there's another consultancy that says, yes, this is called the situation, complication, resolution. Yeah, but that's super boring.
Yeah.
And so I like to think of it as once upon a time, dragons, and happily ever after.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the arc, right? That's the
It's
arc.
the arc. It's the arc, baby. And I mean, it's people credit Shakespeare. I'll tell you, it goes a lot earlier than that. Like cave paintings pretty much hit the arc. Like, look, it's sunshine. Oh God, there's a cougar. Oh, look, there's a family. Like this stuff precedes everything, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So team, we're going to get into some 201 level stuff right now, or as I like to call it, the communicative underworld. And here's how it's going to work. The first part is to recognize that there's more than words at play here. Words, or linguistics, are really only about 35 to 45% of your communicative payload. And
Mm,
by all means, right, use great words, but don't get too cute, right? Simple beats sophisticated any day of the week. In fact, simple is sophisticated.
mhm.
I often can tell a second tier communicator because they use words like narrative competence. Like, who says that?
Yeah.
Just say
Oh, yeah. Yep.
storytelling,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Uh, uh, my favorite leaders know all the smarty pants things, but they spare us from the smarty pants language, right? Think straight, talk straight.
Yeah. And it almost feels like one has to live through that phase in their career.
Yeah,
And I almost want to like there's a phase where you are where that is kind of, oh my God, I know a lot and I need to demonstrate my competence and credibility, right?
right. Yep.
And then all things going well, you actually outgrow that phase,
That's it.
right?
No, as some leaders have famously said over the last couple of years, I'll keep the names out of it, but the only way out is through,
Mhm.
right? You
Yeah,
start as a bronze medalist, you know basic things. Then congratulations, you're a silver medalist, you know fancy things, and you show it. The
yeah,
gold medalist, I know fancy things and I keep it simple, right?
love it.
You want clarity to override cleverness, right? My team teases me inappropriately so that I have an unhealthy fetish for alliteration, right? Like three words and they all start with the same letter, right? Oh, now, new, and next. Oh. It's mimetic, it's sticky. Too much of it becomes an eye roll. And so you can alliterate a little bit, right? You can rhyme some of the time, but too much sugar gets saccharine, right? And so just be mindful. Now, again, what's the other 60% of communications? Well, half of the other 60%, a good 30% of your payload is something called paralinguistics. It's the tone of your voice. Do you go up to connote excitement? Do you speed up to connote earnestness? Or do you slow down to deliver a point? Right? President Barack Obama, hashtag not a political comment, part of his oratory skill, I've actually seen papers on this stuff. Yeah, depending on your political persuasion, the sounds coming out of his mouth were interesting or not, but it was the musicality, right? No, 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 no. People go, I like that sounds good, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., same deal. Right? There is a meaning in the musicality, the pausing, the notes, and the tone. Leverage that, own that with intentionality. What's the opposite? Monotone. Don't do that. And then kinesic, body language. Right? One of the most powerful moves I've ever seen was one of my clients who stood up in a meeting on a Zoom call. And I was like, whoa, this really matters because he owned his
Wow. Yeah.
space. Yeah.
Wow.
You don't see that very often.
You
And
don't see
so
that. No. Yeah.
lean in, lean back, arms, eyes. This is why cameras on in a Zoom age can be a differentiator because you're literally bringing more of yourself to the party. Now, why did we go into a Mario underworld? What was that? Frankly, it was a feature and not a random oversight like slide 4 was totally planned, right? But here's the thing. Right around 2/3, 3/4, 70% of anything, things start to feel a little samey. You're in an hour-long meeting at work. Oh, 40 minutes and it's kind of boring now. You're in an 8-hour workday. It's 2 p.m. Man, the Spaniards have this figured out. I should take a siesta. You're in a 3-minute pop song. 2 minutes in, I get it. Verse, chorus, verse, chorus. What do? You change it up. In music, it's called the bridge.
Yeah,
Now it's time for guitar solo, which
yeah,
has since been replaced by a hip hop, solo or whatever.
yeah,
Rapping, I
yeah,
should say.
exactly.
I
Yeah,
know music well enough to not screw that up. But here's the thing. Right around 70%, people are feeling the curse of repetition. Do something different. In my case, it was a Mario Underworld. Oh, that's different. We're in a different place. I love it. Why? Because it breaks a talk into two interesting talks, and the second one's short enough, and we know we can get through it. Right? You're looking at this. You're like, oh, cool. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's only 2 more to go. I'm good. I'm re-energized. I show baseball here.
right.
Harry Carey from Chicago. I took one of my French colleagues 20 years ago to a Chicago Cubs game. Right? He looks to me. His name was Surreal. He looks to me. He goes, "What is this thing where we were playing baseball, but now we are all singing? This is strange to me." It's like surreal. It's called the seventh inning stretch. It's last call for alcohol, and we're changing it up. The punchline is change is good, and
Yeah,
specifically put it in right around 70%. Home stretch team, number 9, Oscar Wilde, famous Irish playwright, right? Courageously open with his lifestyle and his sexuality and all the things at a time when it was took extra courage to do so. One of his great quotes, which I just love, he said, "Be yourself, everybody else is already taken." The worst thing you could do is come out of a session like this doing like Mike Bechtel impressions in your office, right? Like, hey, I learned this new way to communicate. It involves hands up and poorly delivered accents. Yeah, that no, right? I want you to be you plus plus, right? I want you, if you're an analytic guardian, be an analytic guardian, but use 3 coats of paint, change it up, right? The narrative competence, because none of these make you into anybody but you. They just zhuzh you up a little bit. The second thing I'd say is part of how you be you is please, by all means, don't read. If you're given a talk, people can smell if you're reading. Like a CPU that's knocking at 90% that only leaves 10% of your processor to be human. And some of my, I'm sure you've seen it, Dalibor, right? Some of our favorite people, when they're reading a script, it's like Earth to Moon, where's the soul? Right? They're gone. Now, if it's an
yeah,
SEC regulated earnings call, that's a different matter. You're not there to persuade, you are there to deliver the facts, right? If it's a material cyber breach, yeah, you might, yeah, go ahead and read that script. But for all the events in your life where being you, bringing authenticity and persuasion and inspiration to the mix is part of it, please, right? Be you. Now, on the flip side, the other thing you don't want to do is memorize. Memorization is even worse. When somebody's in that audio animatronic memorization mode, there's even less twinkle in the eye. The way around it is you do something called anchoring. Anchoring is whatever you're there to talk about and have 3, ideally no more than 3, points that you're making per piece. And then just be you as you bob and weave around the points, right? This presentation is here more for me than for you, to be honest. It's to look back and say, oh yeah, WYSIWYG. You want to be what you see is what you get. Somebody said, you get tired of giving this talk. You've done it several times. I go, no, it's always a different talk, right? Because whether it's Dalibor taking me in different directions,
yeah,
slide 4 being in the spot where slide 8 should be, right? It's always a different
yeah,
journey between those 10 poles.
yeah.
All right, team. 10 of 10. Dalibor, let me ask you this question, brother. Um, do you, like me, become a fan and expert in gymnastics once every 4 years during the Olympics?
No,
No, you don't. You just eschew it totally. See, you took this talk in a different direction. Do you just reject gymnastics outright? Tell me more. I'm fascinated. Here, here's where I'm going with this, buddy. My son Brady has
yes,
done gymnastics competitively for almost his whole life, right? He just retired here as a senior in high school. And it's funny because my wife Barb and I, we've sat through hundreds of hours of gymnastics meets, and we watch all the flipping and twisting and moves, etc. And we kind of pretend we know what's going on, but we really don't. But there's something we really do understand. Like every other North American who tunes in during the Olympics to watch Simone Biles here, we see whether or not they stuck the landing.
I know.
Right? And it could be like a quintuple super twisty flippy lindy something something that's never been done in humanity. But if they land like this,
Yeah,
you're like,
you know,
oh,
yeah, exactly.
oh, right. My buddy Brady, his friend Tim would do like a single and land it like, and all the muggles in the audience would applaud like he's so good. And Brady would be like, it's a single.
Yeah.
The point is, no matter how good the movie is, you're going to be judged on how good the ending is. And it's not fair, but it's true. And so here's how you make sure that you don't let everybody down at the very tail end. You want to summarize that third coat of paint. And the way you want to typically do it is with a different look and feel, ideally visually. Two, you want to close the loop, a callback to something at the open that brings a symmetry and a poetry to what you've been talking about. And then finally, you want to issue a call to action, or as I like to call it, homework. This helps the audience feel like they've been talked with and engaged, not talked at and edutained.
Mm.
And so here's me endeavoring to do just that. This is me endeavoring to stick the landing and feel more like a pa than a ah. As a reminder, what we talked about today, team, is that you start out by not talking at all. You hush, not just to bring gravitas, but as my dad said, 2 ears, 2 eyes, 1 mouth for a reason. You are explicitly and tacitly anticipating and getting around audience expectations. 2, you start to apply the triple coat. You open with a clear, vivid expectation of what's coming, not to paint the wall, but to undo whatever the audience was thinking about. We are here to talk about storytelling, not whatever Excel spreadsheet you were working on 40 minutes ago. Then you begin to apply the second and most meaningful coat, which is starting, you map the room. Here's where we are in the movie so that whether you love it or you hate it, you know that there's this much left. 2, you use brevity, right, as a tool to manage finite attention so that there's space between the notes for people to appreciate and ruminate. You use analogies because they are like bridges between the known and the new, right? They connect with optimal informational fidelity and density.
Yeah.
You bring the drama, not gossip, not workplace problems, rather situation, complication, resolution, right? Because that is the arc. You use more than words. You use tone and you use hands because you're a full human. Be one. You change it up. Just when people are like, oh boy, this guy, 3 more of these. No, we got something totally different here, right around the 70% mark. And we only have 2 more to go. What were they? Oh, right. Authenticity, that's easy. Just be you. And 10, stick the landing. That's what we're trying to do here now. If you do those things, what you'll find, gang, this is the callback, okay, the poetry, the symmetry. You'll find that you can't fix it all, but you can fix some of it, right? And you'll notice that, I'd let me rebuild that for those at home, right?
Awesome.
Right? Yeah. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be better. And that's all we can ask for, right? Is be better. Team, your
And
homework, your call to action, just with brevity. And sorry, Dalibor, I cut you off, buddy.
no, 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 no. I was gonna say mic drop on
Yeah,
that one, right?
right. God bless you. The thing is, team. Um, so many of our workplace cultures, right, have layers of explicit and tacit expectations around the junior people make the slides, the senior people read the slides, risk department reviews the slides. You can't say that. You have to say this. I would say within the rule set, be you, make your own stuff. I had the absolute privilege of seeing Taylor Swift in Madrid, Spain 2 weeks ago. I was as surprised to be there as anybody. That's another story. But under the four tiers of fans at the Bernabeu Real Madrid Super Stadium and the 150 semi trucks with the laser beams and the lights and the backup dancers and the musicians and all the things and the outfits. Part of what I realized is under that performer's appeal is this sense that that lady writes her own music, right? And it's her own music plus 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 at this point, but there's a realness there, and that's what I wish for y'all. So your homework is to next time you're being asked to deliver a communication, resist orthodoxy and try out your own singer songwriter mojo. Dalibor, that's all I got, buddy, and I'm ready for any and all conversations that the team might have.
This was truly a masterclass. I want to thank you very much. This was masterclass and masterfully delivered. And you know what? I think it's pretty damn cute, given that we talk about authenticity and the need to come across as who you are, that we did have a bit of a, I
Right.
had a freeze of me at the beginning. We skipped number 4. So it was really genuinely
Right.
honest
Yeah.
conversation, which I loved, which I
Right.
loved. I almost want to start. No, let's end here because this was so perfect and well done with such a delightful landing. Ta-da! Mic drop. Right. So thank you.
Sure. You're so
Now,
very welcome.
a couple of there are many questions coming. Sadly, we're not going to be able to address them because we only have really some few minutes left. Um, a lot of people are asking, like, I love the conversation, I love the topic, I know this is critically important. Where do I go to learn more? Like, do you have any ideas or any reflections on resource
Yeah. No, I do. And
or
again,
something?
yeah, I think I think one thing that I'd recommend as a follow-up, Dalibor, is th there are myriad professional communications courses and vendors around the world. And what I would tell you is they tend to teach a level of stuff different than what I just taught. And I wouldn't say it's a 201 or a primer. I would say it's a lot of orthogonal stuff. Because where a lot of people get stuck is stuff like saying or like, right? Or curious quirks like one of mine, I don't know if anybody's seen it, now you will, but I'll lick my lips a lot,
Mm,
right? And so a lot of these courses will record you. You'll do your thing, you'll hate to watch yourself, but you will get better.
mhm.
So I think number one would be look at some professional speaking courses. They can
Yeah,
help you manage through your phobias and tics. The second thing I'd say is read a lot of books and watch a lot of movies. And the best storytellers are professional storytellers. And
yeah.
and as an adult, I find that I'll watch movies I watched as a kid, and I've learned as an adult that the boring parts, they're there for a reason. Character development, exposition, tension building. Um, that's the mojo you want to bring into your professional communications, so long as you're out to achieve a business outcome. Yeah.
Yeah, this is very good, and certainly, of course, as a matter of fact, I know firsthand the value of working with a communications coach. As a matter of fact, here in Canada, we've been working with a particular gentleman who actually has a whole company built around storytelling skills,
Yep.
who coaches TED Talk speakers and is member of the Singularity faculty and so forth. So there are amazing organizations where you can go and get some actual instruction, including practice. And one more thing that I would say about the practice is, like, there is, I think, no other, no, there's no substitute. There are other ways that be helpful, but just like everything else, practice is the way to Carnegie Hall, right?
That's right.
So this, I think, also is a learned and practiced skill that can be improved, I believe,
Yeah,
right?
I'm with you.
You provided the scaffolding here that can help people actually understand how to prepare, but there is no substitute to actually taking this into actual preparation and actual practice and actual recording and actual watching you talk and actually learning from, like, so that would be, I'm just sort of amplifying what you said, adding that practice here
Yeah,
is really an important element.
I think so, pal.
Yeah.
I do. And you don't, so a question that I often get is this nature or nurture, right? And I'll say, while I happened to do theater in high school and radio in college and all that, I don't think it was anything, uh, I don't think most of it was innate. I think
Yeah.
I've simply had a head start, right? So I don't look at it as, a causal thing. I look at it as I got into this a little earlier and it's never too late to get started. So yeah, practice, man.
Yeah,
Practice.
absolutely. Mike, I want to thank you so very much. We are almost at time. For the audience members, thank you for your time. Thank you for your questions and for your comments. I really appreciate them all. Next week, we are going to have another very, very cool conversation. I'm going to be actually welcoming a managing partner of a large global executive search firm, and we're going to talk about boards and board directorship and different types of boards and how do how do executive search firms go and find board directors, and we'll take specifically the tech leaders lens to this, and we'll talk also about what executive search firms look nowadays when they're looking for tech executives. So like what does a great CIO candidate look like? So please join us for that next week. As you know, all of these sessions are posted on the LinkedIn, so please go register there. And with that, Mike, hats off. Drop the mic, Mike. It was fantastic. And I know and I look forward to having you come back for more interesting topics for our audiences. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dalibor, for your leadership and partnership, buddy.
And
Thanks,
to
everybody.
everybody else, have yourselves a lovely Wednesday afternoon. Bye bye.